Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honors to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah, Kodash, the one to see the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is your brother Ayash Gabar from the GMS Virginia camp, coming at you with another lesson that I pray that you find edifying through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai. And this is a little article out of Shit Hits the Fan Plan.com, and the title of it reads, "It seemed like peace was so close, but now war fever has returned with a vengeance." And this is dated August 22nd, 2025. And a lot of people don't understand prophecy, and they don't understand that what's going on in the world is the will of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. You know, there will be no peace in the earth, you know, because Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is all about division. You know, this is his movie, and the fact that you don't understand prophecy shows how a lot of people are just going to get caught up and not have any understanding as to what's going on and why it's happening until it's too late. But last week or the week before, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had met at a meeting up there in Alaska to come to some agreement on ending the war, but that never happened. Donald Trump came back empty-handed, and Vladimir Putin left empty-handed. You know, and that's all the will of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So a lot of people see war, you know, coming, and it's coming quick. So I'm gonna get to this article. Salakia. I'm gonna get into this article and break out a few precepts, and I pray that you find edifying. Going on with the article, I have to admit that I'm feeling very frustrated today. Last week, there was so much optimism that we could finally see peace, but now war fever has returned with a vengeance. The situation in the Middle East threatens to spiral out of control. There is a very real possibility that the U.S. military could soon be conducting operations in Mexico and Venezuela, and it appears that our last chance for peace with Russia could be going up in smoke. I was writing about a coming war with Russia many years before it became fashionable. And I continue to warn in the strongest terms possible about what will happen if we do not reverse course. But of course, world leaders don't listen to the people like us. They continue to make decisions that can drag us into the unthinkable. And this writer doesn't understand that the minds of the kings is in the hands of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So he can sit there and warn all he wants, but at the end of the day, the words of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai will not return unto him void. You know, the Lord said that, you know, Babylon the Great is going to go up in smoke. This is that lake of fire, aka America, you know, and the other nations around the world. You know, America's enemies and allies is going to drop nukes on this place. That's written in scripture. You know, so you can have all the optimism that you want just because you see two leaders getting together. But at the end of the day, as I said, the words of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai shall not return unto him void. You know? Reading on with the article, last night, the Russians absolutely pummeled Ukraine with drone and missile strikes. One of the targets that was hit was an American-owned manufacturing facility. So, GOG ain't playing. Russia isn't playing. Russia is, they're not fucking around, you know? So, they're going to do what they need to do. In its overnight attacks, Russia launched a total of 574 strike drones and 40 missiles on Ukraine. The President Vladimir Zelensky said Thursday, hitting as far west as the city of Lviv. Missiles also struck an American-owned manufacturing company, Flex Ltd., in the western region of Zakarpattia, in an attack that injured at least 19 people. And I'm pretty sure it's a lot more than that, They like to water down the numbers, or they like to give false numbers to, how bad that they're doing, Ukrainian officials said Flex is an American Singaporean company that provides electronics manufacturing services and is headquartered in Austin, Texas. Overnight, Russian missiles attacked one of the largest American investments in Ukraine, Flex. An active member of the Chamber of Commerce said, Andy Hunter, president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine, Russia continues to destroy and humiliate U.S. businesses in Ukraine, targeting companies that invest and trade on the U.S. stock market. So Russia is hitting American businesses. Russia is destroying American businesses, and America just don't know what to do about it. Because contrary to what a lot of these Babylonians seem to think, Russia is a great superpower. I would dare to say that their military arsenal, or their nuclear arsenal, far exceeds that of the nuclear arsenal that they have here in Babylon the Great. Like with their supersonic missiles that can't be knocked out of the sky. But let me read on with the article. I am very displeased that the Russian chose to target U.S.-owned businesses, because they should have known that this would really upset the Trump administration. Yeah, right. That's what Trump cares about. The businesses, money. Whoever authorized this attack is not thinking rationally, because it threatens to further derail the peace process. Of course, the Ukrainians are going to try to squeeze as much out of this incident as they possibly can. So, they could sit there and, they could think whatever it is that they want to think and make all the threats that they want to do here in Babylon the Great. But at the end of the day, they don't understand that the prophecies of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, is going forth. And Vladimir Putin ain't fucking around. Vladimir Putin has that mindset that, hey, as a matter of fact, let me just get it. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and verse 4. And I will put Salah, and I will turn thee back and put hooks in thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, and even a great company of bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. And what is that talking about? That's talking about Yahweh Hashem Yahushua sticking that hook in the jaws of Gog, aka Russia, to have that old Soviet mindset, and that's what you're starting to see. But a lot of people are so young, they don't really understand how close Babylon the Great has come to nuclear war with the old Soviet Union. You have that old Cuban Missile Crisis that, I remember growing up, hearing about, and then you have, President Ronald Reagan, who was able to get Gorbachev, to tear down the wall, to, open up that part of the region. So, you know, Vladimir Putin has seen all of these things happen, and Vladimir Putin understands the treachery of Babylon the Great. You know, he understands that, you know, this is a place not to be trusted. You know, because even back then, I believe he was what do you call their spies? I forget what you call their spies over there in Russia, but you know, he was a part of the Kremlin back then. And now they made this same man who was a part of the Kremlin, who actually lost his job at one point, as president. So he understands, you know, the fourth tongue of, you know, these Babylon the Great. Now, don't get it twisted. He's an Edomite as well. But, you know, that hook is being put in his jaw, you know, to have that old mindset of not trusting Babylon the Great at all, you know. And for anybody who actually thinks that peace is going to come out of this, they're sadly mistaken. You know, this is a pretty good article. You know, it's pretty lengthy. I'm not going to go into the whole ends of it, but nonetheless, you know, you can read this article, and it's out of the shithitsthefanplan.com. It's a really good article to get into, you know, to expound in on other lessons, but I'm going to break out a few precepts, and, you know, that'll be that. The book of Isaiah, chapter 31 and verse 1. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou was not spoilest, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt treacherously not with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end of dealing treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. And as I said, you know, this place has actually done so much dirt to all the nations of the world that when they finally decide to say, I give up, or not so much I give up, but all right, I'm ready to be good with you now. The other nations are going to look at their past history and be like, nah, fuck that. You know, I remember when you said that before, when you gave our people viruses. I remember when you said that before, when you dropped bombs on our people. I remember when you said that before, when you know, killed our leaders. I remember when you said that before, and you still did all of these things that caused me not to trust you ever again. You know? So these other nations remember, and don't think for a minute that Japan doesn't remember what they did, you know, to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The only difference is Japan is just scared shitless because they don't want it done ever again to them. But I'm pretty sure that Japan got some shit for Babylon the Great too, because you can't do that to a people and expect the people to say, all right, we good now, without them getting their licks in. And these other nations are going to get their licks in. These other nations are gearing up for war. The book of Job, chapter 3 and verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war come near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. And let the weak say, I'm strong. And you know, that's what you're seeing. You know, you're seeing these weak nations, or you're seeing these nations who were once weak, who was afraid of Babylon the Great, starting to see Babylon the Great, you know, being a little hesitant to do certain things to certain countries, aka Russia. They could talk all the bullshit they wanted to talk about Russia. They could say whatever it is that they want to say about Russia, but at the end of the day, the minute they do some shit that Russia really looks at as crossing the line, you know, shit's gonna happen and shit's gonna go down. And that's not what they want to happen. So the other nations are seeing what nations out there that are giving Babylon the Great problems. You know, and you know, scripturally speaking, you know, Russia's gonna be a guard unto these nations. Russia's gonna be a guard to Iran, Iraq, certain parts of Ham, you know, certain parts of Africa. He's going to be a guard unto them. And when that happens, and plus you still got China, you got North Korea, you know, this place is about to be destroyed, you know. That's why the scriptures call this the city of unwalled villages, you know. And now all of a sudden this devil wanna build a golden dome. Come on, man. Come on, man. You can't even stop one of these Russian missiles. And you saw that over there, you know, in our land, over there in Jerusalem. You know, their Iron Dome system was nothing compared to these supersonic missiles. So it's going down, and it's going down at a level that a lot of people just don't understand because they don't understand scriptures. So I'll end up on this because the writer of this article was betting on peace, you know, and there shall be no peace. Yahushua said, I'm coming with division, you know. Yahushua is setting the people apart from each other. Salakia. The book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3. For when they shall say peace and safety, and that's what they want to hear. They want to hear peace and safety. And something's going to happen where, you know, they're going to say peace and safety. Something's going to happen where they have this sense of peace and safety, but they're going to say it. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. They're not going to escape these nuclear missiles. They're not going to escape this world war. They're not going to escape the judgments of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai in no shape, form, or fashion. You know, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai has, yo, Babylon the Great is through, and you're seeing it. Hell, the people are even seeing it. You know, and this place is being cooked from within. And these other nations are sitting back and watching this place crumble from within. And just like Esau, Edom is waiting, you know, to go against you Jakes, biting at the bits. These other nations are biting at the fucking bits as well. You know, these other nations want to see this fucking place go. So yeah, man, you know, if you actually think that there's going to be peace and safety, you know, from this point on, you're sadly mistaken. There's going to be a war. There's going to be nuclear destruction. There's going to be the RFID microchip. There's going to be a race war. There's going to be a civil war. There's going to be a famine, and there's going to be a financial collapse. There's going to be a total collapse of this entire system over here in Babylon the Great. And it's coming, and it's right before you. So the war just doesn't start with these other nations. You know, you Jakes have always been in a war, but you just never knew that you were in a war. You know? And so with that, I pray that you found it edifying. You know, this is a really good article. I didn't want to go too deep into it. But, you know, the point is made. You know, the writer seems to think that there could have been peace brought out of the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, or Vladimir Putin, Salakia, you know, and that could be further from the truth because Yahweh Hashem Yahushai is a man of war. So what do you think is going to come out of everything that's happening? War. You know? And so with that, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honors to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. Shalom.